There's something strange, almost impossible to explain, about the fact that we inhabit a planet so massive, so immense, overflowing with different languages we'll never speak, extreme temperatures we'll never feel, vibrant cities we'll never walk through, endless barren landscapes, entire ways of living, and accumulated memories we'll never encounter. And yet, despite all this vastness, most of us spend our entire existence tethered to a microscopic, tiny point on the map. We grow up navigating the same familiar streets over and over, crossing paths repeatedly with the same recognizable faces, carrying the same fixed last names we inherited without question, not the ones we would have chosen if we could. And somehow, in some deep way, it seems like the entire world expects this to remain exactly as it is, as if the specific stage that welcomed us early on should also be the only stage where we must stay and remain until everything ends. The thing is, life doesn't really work that well when it's forced and crammed into these rigid expectations. There's a completely silent pressure, an invisible social gravity that continuously forces us to remain trapped in the narrow orbit of the familiar and the known, even when that same orbit slowly suffocates us. At some point along the way, sooner or later inevitably, almost everyone ends up feeling a strange, persistent, and insistent desire to abandon everything completely. It's not a weak, fleeting impulse, not a simple vague and loose idea, but that strong internal calling that constantly resonates like an intense vibration that never leaves your chest in peace. A completely silent phrase that clearly says, get out of here, disappear for a while, run completely from what you know so well, change all of this right now. In the end, where does this deep desire really come from? Is it pure escape? Is it true courage? Is it pure, intense despair? Or is it perhaps one of the absolutely most honest and true things we can really feel in human existence? It's a deep crack in the solid wall of ingrained habit, a powerful cry from your potential that's still uninhabited and unexplored. It's the strong intuition that the specific map they handed you at the beginning no longer resembles the real territory you're walking on now. Let's dive deep into this. All of us have felt at least once in our lives the intense desire to throw some basic clothes into an old bag and head straight in the exact direction of the first bus that appeared ahead without even looking back for a second. Sometimes there is indeed a very clear and obvious reason, a serious relationship that completely soured, a painful sequence of failures that seems much bigger than you can process. An entire city that became too small to contain your existential questions, a heavy routine that no longer speaks in any way to your deep soul. Other times, the complex feeling arrives without warning, arrives like an inexplicable emptiness, a restlessness without defined shape. You look calmly at your entire life and think, reflecting, there's nothing exactly wrong here, but there's also absolutely nothing breathing the right way inside all of this. Psychology has several names for this impulse. One of them is the instinct for renewal, another is context fatigue. There's even a behavioral hypothesis that suggests that human beings, despite imagining themselves as stable, are creatures profoundly shaped by movement. Context fatigue isn't just boredom, it's a subtle exhaustion of the senses caused by the constant repetition of the same visual, auditory, and social stimuli. It's the brain screaming for efficiency, alerting that it has already mapped this territory completely and that remaining here is a waste of cognitive resources. Our ancestral brain learned to live by walking, migrating, exploring. Still life in a way clashes against this ancient architecture. If you spend 10 years looking at the same ceiling, the brain starts to ignore that ceiling. And worse, if you spend 10 years receiving the same expectations, the brain starts to ignore the possibilities outside those expectations. Someone would say we're a species that lives in fixed houses, but with nomadic souls. And another would say that this desire to leave is more human than paying bills. It's almost a calling. Many people know this desire to leave everything behind, precisely when it's in ruins. I myself have felt this, and it wasn't just once. Anyone who lives through this knows. The entire city transforms into a living archive of things that went wrong. Every corner becomes a bad memory. Every coffee shop reminds you of a specific day. Every person you meet seems to carry a piece of your past that you no longer want to touch. And then the impulse to escape emerges. The thought that says, if I change places, maybe I'll change too. If I disappear, maybe I'll find myself again. Science calls this the rupture heuristic, the idea that by drastically changing the environment, we also activate the sensation of a new beginning. It's almost like pressing a reset button in the brain. The problem is that the reset is never complete because there's a part that always travels with us, ourselves. But this doesn't invalidate the impulse, it makes it human. The mistake isn't desiring the reset, but believing it can be bought with a plane ticket. The real reset needs to happen inside, but the change of scenery can be the catalyst, the permission your mind needs to allow itself internal change. There's a silent logic behind the desire to leave. When life stagnates, movement becomes salvation. When pain repeats, distance becomes relief. When the past weighs heavy, Geography becomes anesthesia. And although we know rationally that changing places doesn't change who we are, there's something psychologically powerful about finding new scenarios, new routines, new people who don't know our history. Social psychology speaks of something called narrative freedom. In simple words, it means that the way others see us influences the way we see ourselves. When we're surrounded by the same people with the same expectations, with the same memories about us, our identity ends up frozen. The waiter sees you as the guy who always orders the latte. Your family sees you as the one who never finished college. Your friends see you as the eternal clown. These labels are invisible anchors that prevent you from redefining yourself. When we change places, we reload our identity from zero. There's no prior history, no inherited expectations. You introduce yourself, and the person meeting you for the first time only knows the version of you that you choose to show. It's not just escape, it's reconstruction. It's a vital opportunity to align your external self with your potential self. Seneca used to say that traveling doesn't cure anything because the mind travels along. In part, he's right. You can't change countries to run from yourself, but there's something he underestimated, the force that context exerts on the human brain. He was writing in a world without internet, without giant cities, without sensory overload, without accelerated capitalism. Today, we live in an environment so artificial that changing space sometimes isn't escape, but biological recalibration. Neuroscience tells us about the phenomenon of neural habituation. When the environment is constant, the brain spends less energy processing it. This is efficient, but it kills creativity and the sense of wonder. Novelty, on the other hand, increases basal dopamine. Novelty awakens the feeling of possibility. Movement creates new neurological roots. Literally, changing scenery breaks the sensory routine and forces the brain to wake up, to process, to create new patterns. So yes, changing places doesn't cure everything, but it can help loosen the rusted screws of the soul. There's also the philosophical side. Sartre said, "We're condemned to freedom." Bowie reinforced that life only makes sense when we ourselves build it. Seen from this angle, leaving everything behind isn't escape, it's affirmation. It's you telling the world, I'm the one who decides the direction. It's you breaking the script they gave you and writing your own. And here's the part that few dare to admit. Sometimes staying is an act of cowardice. Staying inside the bubble, staying inside the limited version of yourself, staying because it's safe, staying because others expect it. The fear of uncertainty and attachment to comfort are the most effective jailers. Leaving, in this sense, is a radical gesture of freedom. It's you claiming authority over your own narrative. It's not about happiness, it's about authenticity. Since we were children, we fantasized about going beyond. We played rockets, pirates, jungles. We created stories where we crossed worlds. This imagination isn't just child's play, it's the natural rehearsal of a brain shaped by millions of years of exploration. Our DNA knows movement better than it knows routine. That's why the desire to leave seems so natural. It's a return, not a rupture. The strange feeling isn't the madness of wanting to escape. It's the lucidity of perceiving that the potential inside you is too big for the current container. It's the intuition that you're living a life below your possibilities. So, is it right to leave? There's no universal answer, but there's a question worth gold. Are you leaving to escape who you are or to discover who you can be? If the answer is the second, the world is ready for you. If it's the first, that's okay too. Sometimes escaping is necessary to survive. Nobody is born ready to face everything. The truth is that the desire to leave everything behind isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of excess lucidity. It's realizing that life isn't a prison. It's remembering that the world is big and you have the right to experience more than just the place where you grew up. Maybe none of us were made to remain on the same ground. Maybe the impulse to leave is confirmation that we're still alive. And maybe the feeling we carry in our chest when we think about leaving is our most true self trying to emerge. There's an almost perfect example of the impulse to abandon everything that doesn't come from cowardice, but from lucidity. Henry David Thoreau, he didn't just think about leaving, he left. He walked out of Concord, Massachusetts, and went to live alone for 2 years and 2 months in a cabin by Walden Lake. He didn't take luxuries, didn't take company, didn't take expectations. He only took his restlessness and the almost physical desire to exist far from social noise. The world usually treats his experience as minimalism, but that word is too superficial. Thoreau wasn't seeking a simple life, he was seeking an essential life. These are very different things. The difference is crucial. The simple life seeks comfort with fewer things. The essential life seeks confrontation with the naked truth of existence, eliminating everything that gets in the way. According to him, society creates noises that hide what we are. Excessive work, mechanical rush, consumption, inherited obligations. All of this functions like a veil that covers consciousness itself. To see life truly, Thoreau believed it was necessary to first silence everything that wasn't life. And when he wrote this, he was serious. The cabin wasn't a metaphor, it was a cut. Modern psychology calls what he did social sensory deprivation, a deep distancing from the habitual environment to allow the brain to reorganize without invasive stimuli. Today, we know that prolonged silence has measurable effects on cognition, increases neuroplasticity, strengthens focus, and reveals internal patterns that normally remain covered by routine. Thoreau, without neuroscience, discovered this through his own experience. He realized that life, when reduced to the essential, confronts us with questions we avoid answering. Who am I when nobody calls me? What's left of me when the world demands nothing? What really matters when life stops being a race and becomes presence? These questions are violent. They're questions that break illusions, and that's why so many people fear silence. In silence, the echo of one's own truth appears. Thoreau didn't run from society, he ran from anesthesia. Moving away from people wasn't escapism. It was surgery, an act of cutting everything that was excess. A radical gesture of honesty. He saw the lives of his neighbors, the mass of men, enslaved by financial obligation to sustain a bigger house or more luxurious life, a self-imposed slavery that consumed their time and soul. He wanted to be someone who lives by choice, not by mechanical drag. When Thoreau wrote that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, he wasn't being poetic. He was describing what he saw when observing everyday life too closely. Quiet desperation is exactly that, being stuck in places, routines, and identities we didn't choose, but carry as if they were destiny. The tragedy isn't open suffering, but quiet resignation, the acceptance of a life that feels foreign. Thoreau decided to break that destiny. He decided to abandon everything, to listen to his own soul without interference. And most importantly, he came back. After 2 years, he returned to the city, and this is crucial to understanding his gesture. He didn't stay living isolated forever, because solitude wasn't the goal, it was the instrument. For Thoreau, leaving wasn't denying the world, it was tuning it. It was putting life itself into focus. It was purifying the gaze, cleaning perception, recovering meaning. He proved that leaving isn't always a definitive act. Sometimes it's an immersion. Sometimes it's a pause. Sometimes it's the only way to continue living without betraying yourself. Modern society is louder, faster, and more saturated than in the 19th century. If he already perceived the invisible currents in his time, imagine what he would see now. The tyranny of email, the obsession with notifications, the obligation to always be available, speed as moral virtue. Today, desperation is even louder and is camouflaged by hyperconnection. If Thoreau were alive today, he'd probably be called crazy, eccentric, antisocial, radical, but he was just honest. Honest enough to admit that common life, if lived without questioning, transforms into an automatic and almost dead ritual. He left everything behind to recover the vigor of his own existence. And maybe this is the deepest reason for our desire to leave. We don't want to escape, we want to return. Return to what's authentic, return to what's alive, return to what's ours before the world molds us so much that we don't recognize who we are. You who've made it to this point already know you're not alone in this strange feeling. Your lucidity is an asset. I'd like to know honestly, what scares you more, leaving or staying? Leave your comment. If this message resonated with you, support it with a like and share this video. And if you want to go even deeper, consider joining the channel community. It's the most direct way to support this space of reflection, keep the project alive, and access exclusive content for our community. To our current members, thank you so much. You're the backbone that makes this kind of conversation possible. Thank you for being here.